All right, so now let's go ahead and move in to start building some of our template files. And I'm going to close up a few of these things in here just to give us a little bit of room to work with here. And we'll open this stuff up sort of back as we need it. But we're going to come into templates here under default. And what we're going to create is we're going to create a header.php. So this is a template part. This isn't a page in and of itself, but it's going to help us to build our template pages. So we'll go ahead and open that up. And so this is where you have some options when you're building your template. Now I am using Bootstrap, and I'm using sort of a combination of this blog theme here, or this blog example, and this carousel example. So from carousel, I'm really just using the menu up here because I like that menu. And from blog, I'm basically using everything else. Okay, so it's sort of a mismatch of stuff. The way it works though is that because this is all Bootstrap, I actually just took the style sheet from this blog example, and that's what I'm using over here. And then you can just change the way that it is constructed, and the menu is constructed in the HTML, and it's actually all of the stuff to do this is built into Bootstrap. So I didn't really need this particular style sheet from this example. So depending on what you want to do, again, with how you build your template and so forth, this will certainly change for you. I'm going to try and streamline this a little bit because if you've ever worked with Bootstrap, you know how it works. There can be a ton of classes and stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and drop in just the head tag for right now and sort of just walk through this. So this is a standard sort of Bootstrap head tag that you will get from any of their examples. So of course we open the HTML tag, the language is English. We open the head tag. We have our required meta tags, which the character set is set to UTF-8. And then we have this meta tag here, which essentially is for responsive sites. So we do that. We include the Bootstrap CSS right here. Notice we are using the CDN, so that gives us a little bit of, will help us tap into the browser caching that we'll get from that. And then we are referencing this blog theme that we've got from Bootstrap. So that doesn't actually exist yet. So what we'll want to do is we'll want to go into default, and we'll create a new folder, and we'll call this CSS. And then I will get the file that I have from downloading that template from, or that style sheet from Bootstrap. So it's this bs-blog. So now that exists. So we're just loading that, and I'll come back and we'll talk about these PHP functions here in just a second. But I want to go through and get everything sort of set up in here. So the next thing is an icon font. I chose one called Open Iconic. It's, I think, one of the ones that Bootstrap recommends for use with it. And so again, I'll just sort of drag this over here under the default template. And if we open this up, you can see it's this Open Iconic folder that you'll get from downloading from there. And this is really just the full download. So it has the CSS files, the fonts, and so forth. What we actually load in our page is under the CSS folder in this Open Iconic. We're going to load the Open Iconic bootstrap.css. You could probably clean this up. Some of the stuff you probably don't need, I would guess. You could probably use the minified versions maybe. So, but you know, this is just sort of what we're loading for now. So feel free to change that as you see fit. And then the last one is this style.css. And this is sort of just going to be our custom styles here. And I'll go ahead and drag this file over here and open it up real quick. And you can see it's not a ton. We will sort of go through this as we get to those different points in here, but this is really just overriding or changing anything that's in Bootstrap and in this Bootstrap example download here. Now, this is where this particular sort of framework, having a framework like this, can be really powerful because, again, you can create multiple templates here, and you can look at different examples from Bootstrap or whatever you want to use that's out there for front-end frameworks, and you can really pretty easily integrate them into what we're doing here. So having all of this sort of back-end support in the PHP code helps us to more easily be able to build our themes. Okay, so that is the header. Now let's talk about these functions here. So the first one that we have here is home URL, and home URL is one that's just going to help us very quickly get the home URL of the site. So there are a couple things that we need to do here. So first we need to open our config file back up, and inside of our config file we need to specify what's called an absolute URL. And so let me go ahead and just open this up real quick. So we're going to use this define again. So we're going to do define, and we're going to do abs URL, and then we're going to put in the URL wherever this is installed. So this is similar to like when you install WordPress, for example. It figures out what your site URL is, and it saves that as an option in your database. This is sort of the same thing. We're just setting it up inside of a config file here since we don't have any database. So that gives us our absolute URL, and then from there we can write our home URL function here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over under lib here again, and we are going to create a new file, and we are going to call this template.php. And let's open up index and make sure we get template.php required in properly. Again, this is sort of why I like putting these all right on the front in one spot here instead of putting them throughout the files. It's a lot easier to keep track with if you're not going to auto load. All right, so that gets that included. And then if we go into and we open up template.php, our home URL function is actually pretty simple. So function home URL, and we're just going to return our abs URL, our absolute URL. So that's all that function is. Reason we put it in a function, it's a little bit cleaner in the code, but also there may be later on where you want to do something with this URL. And so if you just put it in the function from the start, then you can sort of mess with it inside of the function if you want to later, and you don't have to go back and change all of the places where if you just called absolute URL directly, you don't have any sort of buffer. So this function acts as sort of a buffer in case you want to change things later. All right, so there's that gets all of these home URLs working. And then you can see we have this one here called title tag. So this is also under inside template.php. We're going to do function title tag, and we're going to globalize page or template type. You remember we made that available. We globalized it inside of our Rourke class so that it would be available in the global scope. So now we can globalize and use that here, and we know what our template type is. And so then we're going to start an array, and it's going to be title parts, and it's just going to be an empty array to start off. This deal with any notices, and then we're going to check. And if template type is equal to category, then we're going to build the title tag a little bit differently. So what we're going to add is we're going to add title parts, and this will essentially what these brackets here do is we have an empty array we started here. This will simply add to it, so it'll basically add an element to this. And so we're going to set that equal to, and we're going to have category colon, and then space. So essentially what that does is if it's a category, the title tag will say category colon, and then we'll get the name of the category. Okay, so that's just a quick check that we're going to add if it happens to be a category page. Then from there, for everything, we're going to do title parts. We're going to add another element, and we're going to set this equal to something called get the title. Okay, now get the title is one that's going to, as it describes, it's going to look in the page object and actually get the title. Now we've already created the file where this one goes, so that's under functions. And so up above get content path here, we're going to do function get the title. And here we are going to, actually we need to set this object equals null. That will make a little bit more sense later, but basically the idea is you can either pass in an object that has the data in it, or you can grab what's in the global space inside of a page. So it allows you to create, by using this object equals null thing, it allows you to create a function that can be used. You can create sort of nested loops essentially, because you can use what's in the global space, or you can pass in your own, and all these will still work. And again, like I said, that'll make a little bit sense a little bit later when we get into some more of the template here, but we do this for all of these. So we're going to see if object is equal to null, then we are going to globalize our page variable. Again, that's the one we set inside of Rourke that we spent all that time creating inside of Rourke to make available to these templates. We're now grabbing that, and then we're simply going to return page title. Now, the thing is you could do this all inside of just header.php, but that's a lot of extra code to put over there. You want to use as little code over there as possible, so we put these inside of functions files so that we can just grab these functions and use them. Okay, so it helps make this all a little bit more reusable. And then if object is not equal to null, that means an object has been passed in. And so we're just going to return whatever the title was for the object that was passed in. Okay, so again, that allows us to create these sort of nested loops. And when we create our category template specifically is when that will, and our homepage template, that's when we'll really need those. Okay, so that's what get the title does, is essentially gets the title as the name suggests. And then if we come back over to template, now that get the title works, then we set title equal to, and we're going to implode the array we just built. So we just built an array of parts. Now we're going to implode it into a string, which will go ahead and create the title for us, and then we're going to echo title. Okay, so now let's look about making this work. So let's open up page.php, and let's just real quick change this to include header.php. Okay, so it's just including our header. Inside of our header, we've got home URL, and we've got our title tag here. And so if we go to a page, hopefully this will work. You can see up here our title tag now says about. Let's go ahead and just view page source here. You can see what we just created, this tag here. You can see under where we were referencing home URL, it put in the one that we specified in config.php. So this links everything up properly, and you can see our title tag here is set up properly as well. So that's what those functions do. Allows us to ease all of that and make all that just a little bit easier to create. All right, so now we want to go back over to header, and we want to finish building this out. So again, I'm going to sort of speed up instead of you having you watch me type a bunch of HTML. Because again, the HTML here is sort of arbitrary, right? It's whatever you want to build for your template. So it's a lot less important than the PHP parts of this, which is what I really want to focus on. So this again is just from Bootstrap. So whatever you're using, you would sort of build your header here. You can see we're still using home URL, but now we've got this one called get site info that we need to build, and we have another one called nav menu that we'll need to build. Okay, so we got our nav class, we've got our brand here, which is referencing our home URL, but then we have this echoing get site info. So what is that? Well, get site info is again inside of our functions here, and we'll go ahead and place this above get the title. So we'll do function get site info, and we'll set item equal to null, and then we're going to switch off of that item. Okay, so we're going to run a switch statement, and so we'll do switch item, and then we have we're going to have two different cases that we support essentially in a default. So we'll do case, and if it's what's passed in for the item is title, then we're going to return a constant that we haven't created yet called site title, but we'll go create that in just a second. Break, and then if the case is description, then we'll return again another constant we haven't created yet called site description. And we'll break, and then the default, I've decided for default to just default to the site title. You could handle that however you want, but I'm just going to do site title here. Okay, so that's what get site info does. Obviously, the more complex this gets, you might add to this. You may have more than just title and description and so forth. But again, we need to come over to our config, and we need to then actually create those constants. So we'll do define, and we'll do site title. And for this, I'm just using the title as Rourke. And then we'll do define and site description. And for this, I have this line I use, a bloggy-ish PHP thing. So that's what this is. All right, so those are our constants. So now over inside of, I believe it was functions. Now this will work. So over here inside of header, this will output. Remember, we didn't pass anything in here. We could make this explicit and do title just so we know what's actually being displayed here. So we'll go ahead and do that, but that's going to display the site title here in this nav bar area. Okay, so that's what that is. And then we get into our actual nav menu that we're going to create here. And then here is a link to our RSS feed. So just home URL/feed. So let's talk about nav menu for a second. So first we need to create a new file inside of lib, and let me go and close this up. We need to create a new file inside of lib, and that is going to be called nav, or actually we're going to just call it menus.php. Okay, and then we need to go back over to index, and we have a new file we need to include. So we're going to do, I'm putting these in alphabetical order. So we'll do menus.php. So that's included in. And so now we have the menu. So let's go ahead and open that up. And again, a little bit of this is going to be arbitrary, but it because it's going to be based off of the HTML for the template that you're using. So if you're using Bootstrap or something like that, or you're using a different Bootstrap example, it's going to be different. That HTML is going to be different. But again, the PHP code is going to be sort of very, very similar. The other thing that we need to do is we actually need to go into our content section, and we are going to create different menus. So if we go up into content, and let's go ahead and again close some of these up. Let's go into, we'll create a new folder and we'll call this menu. And then inside of this, we can create different menus that we can load. So in this case, we'll create one called primary. And primary is just going to be a JSON object. So, and actually let me go ahead and let me delete this one. Let me just drag over the one I already have. So let's go menu. Let's open this up. So it's just a JSON object, and you can see it's really simple. This is the menu item. So the first one is home and then about, and that's what's going to be in our menu. So here you have the slug, the path, and then here you have the name, what you want the name of that item to be. So in this case, they both have the same name and so forth. So that gives us our menu. This is inside of content again, so you can maybe guess what we're going to do with this. But in our nav menu function, so we'll create function nav menu, and you have to pass in the name of a particular menu. And then the first thing that we need to do is we need to get the actual we need to get the file that we just created. So that menu file, this primary file here. So we already have the function to be able to do that. So I'm going to create a variable called menu raw. It's going to be set equal to file get contents and then get content path. Get content path, and the path is going to be menu. Right, so that's going to get us to the menu folder, and then the menu that we want is whichever one was passed in. Okay, so that's going to, if the menu exists, that's going to give us the menu. Now, you probably want to do a check here that says is something like this: if not menu raw, then we'll do just return, or we could do return false. Okay, so if the menu doesn't exist, we're not gonna do anything. And then from there, we can go ahead and we can create our menu items, and we'll use JSON to code because that's bringing in that file, which is a JSON object, and we'll pass in menu raw that we just grabbed. And then now we can start building our menu, and this is where it gets a little bit arbitrary because it depends on what sort of theme you're building here, but I'll show you what I've built. So we'll set menu equal to, and we're going to create an unordered list, class equals nav bar nav mr auto, and we'll close that up. All right, we'll close that up. All right, so that starts our menu, and then I'm going to come down here just so I don't forget, and we are going to do menu dot equals, and we'll close up our menu. Now, I'm keeping this nav menu isolated specifically just to the menu list. And then if you have other HTML in your theme that wraps around this, which we will, I'm putting that in the actual header file to make this just a little bit more reusable. So hopefully you don't have to change this stuff as much as you might have to if I put all of that code inside of here. All right, so now that we have that done, now we just need to loop through our object, and we need to build our menu. So we're going to do for each, and we'll do menu items as slug and then title. So that'll put these, we can use slug and title inside of our code going forward to reference these. And then the URL is going to be equal to, and we're going to use a ternary here. Now this is a little complicated, so I want to actually just sort of drop this in and then explain it to you instead of typing through it, because I think it could be a little bit confusing. All right, so these parentheses here are just encapsulating the ternary, okay, and then this code inside is actually the ternary. So the condition we're checking is if slug is equal to home, okay? So if it's equal to home, then we're going to use home URL, and that's it. Otherwise, if the slug is not equal to home, we're going to do sprintf, and we're going to use home URL / the slug. So essentially what this does is it constructs the URL and says, if we're on the home page, we just want the home URL. We don't need the slug to use the slug at all. But if we're on any other page, like the about page or anything else that we might want to link to, then we need to append the slug to the end of it. So if slug is equal to home, the true statement comes first. We're just going to use home URL, then the colon, and this is the false statement. So if it's not equal to home, then we're going to build a URL that has home URL / slug. So that's what we're doing here. So we're building the URL first, and then we are going to add to our menu. So this is going to equal sprintf, and we're going to build a list item inside of this. The classes, again, this is specific to Bootstrap and to the particular theme or example that I happen to be using. These could be anything. A class equals, and we're going to use nav-link, and then href equals, and our first placeholder, and then we'll close that up. We'll do our second placeholder, and then we'll close up our a tag and close up our list item here. And then here we need to specify for our placeholder. So the first placeholder is the URL, and the second one is the title. If you're not familiar with sprintf, I would suggest getting familiar with sprintf. Go look it up in the manual. It's a really handy function. It allows you to create a format. You can drop these placeholders in here, these %s's, and then these variables will get dropped into these spots here. So it's a really handy way for writing HTML that's clean that I like to use a lot. You'll see I used a lot throughout this. Okay, so that creates, for each of our menu items, that's going to create each of those items and append them to our menu. And then we close up our menu here, and the last thing that we need to do is then echo the menu. If we go back over to header, that's our nav menu right here. We're referencing primary. Let's see if everything worked out over here. And let's see. Let's inspect or view page source, see what this full error is. Function, oh, body classes. We still need to create body classes. So if we come over here, let's come back over here. We have this one here called body classes, which I sort of forgot about. So body classes, I believe, is inside of, actually it's going to be in two different places. So the first place that it's going to be inside of is template, which we already have. So we're going to go into template, and we can do function body classes, and this is just going to echo get body classes, which is a function we haven't created yet, but we are going to. Okay, so the point of this is ease of use. This is ease of use inside of your template, but also having get body classes in case you later on want to add stuff to it, that you can call it directly if you need to, and so forth. If you don't, for some reason you don't want to echo it right away or whatever. So again, it just creates a little bit of a buffer there for you to be able to work with this templating stuff. So then we need to go over to functions and actually write the get body classes function. So we're going to do function get body classes, and you remember those two, I told you when we did template type, when we globalized them inside of Rourke, template type and page slug, this is where we're going to use them. Okay, so that's this helps us to be able to create intelligent classes for our body that we can use inside of our CSS. So if we're going to start off with if neither one of the if one or the other of these is not empty. So if not empty, template type, or not empty, page slug. So if one of them has any sort of value to it, then we can do something with it. Otherwise, we'll just come down here and return false. Okay, so all of our actual functionality is going to be inside this if block. So this won't do anything unless one of those exists and has data in it. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, we're going to sort of do like we did before with our menu and some of the other stuff, where we build an array and then we use implode to create the string. So that way we can easily add things to it. So we're going to say classes is equal to array, but this time we're not going to start off with an empty class. We're going to create a first element that says class equals, because we know we're going to have something, because both of these, one of the page slug or the template type has data in it. So we're going to be grabbing something from one of those. So then we're going to close this up down here. So classes and brackets equals, and then our double quotes. So we're going to close our double quotes. So essentially, if you look at this, this is our opening double quote, this is our closing double quote, and then we're going to build stuff inside of this that will go inside of that classes block. That's what we're doing here. So we're going to look at template type first. So if template type is not empty, and we're checking this again because up here we did an or statement. So template type could still be empty, and page slug could be the one that has data in it. So we do need to recheck this at this point. So classes, we're going to do our brackets, and we're going to set this equal to, and I'm doing it this way. So I'm going to do sprintf, and our format is going to be template dash and then placeholder, and the placeholder is the name of the template type. So what this is going to give us is, let's say we're on the page template. That's the page that was loaded. One of the classes in our body will be template-page. So that's what this is building here. Okay. Now it's similar for the page slug. So we'll do if not empty, and we're going to do page slug. So if that's not empty, we're going to add an element to classes, and that is going to be equal to, and we'll do sprintf again. And our format is going to be page, and I'm just doing page ID. You could do page slug or whatever you want to do, but I'm just going with page ID here, and then the page slug. So if we're on the about page, what we'll have is page dash ID dash about. So if you look at this, if you're on, let's say, the about page, what you're going to get is two classes in your body: template dash page, and then page ID dash about. So you will know in your CSS if you are on that you are on the page template and you're on the about page. That can be handy for getting really granular with your CSS if you want to do that. So, and again, we just want to support that inside of our code here. You may never use it, but again, it's supported. So we're going to do return implode. We're not going to have any sort of delimiter to bring them, or glue to bring them back together, and we're going to use our classes array. So this takes all this array that we built and turns it into a string. So that's what get body classes does. So and now you can see we have a menu here. If we view page source, you see what we just did: body class, template dash page, page dash ID dash about. You can see our menu down here, ULs, and we have our list item, LA, LI, class, nav item. We have all of that. Okay. And we come up here, we have our home page that links to the root, and this links to Rourke/about. This links to /Rourke, and this links to Rourke/feed. Okay, so we've got the beginnings of our template coming together here. So that is our header file. That's everything that I have in my header file. And again, we're building the HTML backend to support the template, and we're also building the template, but the template can sort of be whatever you want it to be. That's that HTML that you can decide how you want that to go together. So, of course, this is just the first template part. This is the header. We still have our footer and our sidebar that we need to get to, which we're going to get into in the rest of the course. Hopefully you're enjoying the course up to this point. Now, if you'd like to keep going and finish it off, all my courses are available on Skillshare. And not only will you get access to all of my courses, but over 20,000 others on web design and web development, freelancing, graphic design, online marketing, and more. And it's all for just $10 a month. And as a teacher on Skillshare, I can give you a 2-month free trial. You'll get full access to the entire library of courses, and you can cancel at any time before the trial is up, and you'll never be charged a penny. To learn more and to start your 2-month free trial, head on over to johnmorrisonline.com/Skillshare.